Hi, how are you? Today I will try to tell you something concerning interpretation, what means to make the interpretation of a music. This is the score of the famous children song, Brother Jacob, and I will play it and speak about the interpretation. Interpretation means that we have an idea of this music, of the different passage part of this music, and we try to communicate it, to explain our idea to the listener. It's very difficult to play without idea. We have idea and we make choice also without knowing that we are doing it. The computer doesn't make interpretation. If, for example, we listen the first part of this music, it is clear, 90% of the music is there, but there is no interpretation. For example, the second part, the second half of this music is Brother Jacob, exactly the same note, but written in a completely different way, in relationship between the accent, between the importance of the note, relating to the sense of each sentence. But the computer doesn't know it, and it will play the second part exactly in the same way. Exactly the same. So we can try to make the computer make interpretation, but we have to put a lot of scene, a lot of information, but it's not the argument of what I to tell you now. Starting from the beginning. If I play this music, I can play it trying to know not to have interpretation, without interpretation. It was a small interpretation because I had to breathe. And the moment in which I decide to breathe is still an interpretation, because I breathe when, in my meaning, my idea, a sentence finish and another sentence start. Okay, but just for telling you, many people think that the interpretation is something not so important and that we can play without interpretation. This is wrong. In effect, mostly when we think that we are playing without interpretation, we are playing with a bad interpretation. With that interpretation, there is no great sense and great relationship with the text. But we have to know a very important thing. Interpretation is free. We are free to make any kind, and we are legitimate to make any kind of interpretation. For example, I can think that, in my opinion, these quarter pu 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 are not all the same, but are written or thought in pair. C D E C, C D E C, E F, and then G alone, because it's long too. E, F, G alone. And how I can make for explain my opinion, because if I have this opinion, if I play this opinion remain in my head and not to the listener. I have to do something. Normally, if we think that some for example, two notes are together, that imply that this pair is not together with the second group of notes together. So it is that between the first pair and the second pair we have to cut something, to cut the sound. Something like this. And this is a very good interpretation, in my opinion, and it works very well on how the music is written. Or, for example, look at the second bar of the first bar. It depends on how you count. If you count to the first two notes or not, we have two C. C, C. These C, C make something together. If two C make something together, probably there is a sentence that's make. This sentence exists in music. With two notes, bam, 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 but not in this case. Because in this case, if you look the score, we have C, D, E, C, and after C, D, E, C. So, also if you don't know the word, Fra Martino, Campanaro, dormi tu, frère Jacques, dormez-vous, dormez-vous, or something else in other language, the first four notes are together and the first four notes are repeated. So the second sentence is exactly the same of the first. So if we agree with this relationship between text and note, the two C are not together. It's not C, C, D, E, but C, the first C in the second bar, is the end of the sentence, and the second C is the start of the repetition. Do you understand? So, in my interpretation, not in my Aldo, but in one interpretation, it could be correct or interesting to make a separation between the two C. Another things that I can observe, that's the sentence number 3, E, F, G. It's repeated, E, F, G, like the first sentence. But also there is another things interesting. The first three notes are going up. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And in the third sentence we have 3, 4, 5, 3, 4, 5. So the third sentence has a lot to do with the first. And the third. The only difference is that after G we don't have E. It could be to have a E, but the words of the children's song has not 4 syllables but just 3. So, for example, is an idea to play the sentence number 3 with a similar interpretation of the beginning of the sentence number 1. C, D, E, C, C, D, E, C, E, F, G, E, F, G. Okay. And then what we can say, I'm sorry, but I have problem with the internet, and so they call me for trying to solve the question. So we were telling that the interpretation is a way of explaining our opinion about the shape, about the construction of the music, Of course, we can also think this is the history, the poor child that enter in a forest, and then there is a wolf, and so blah blah blah. I'm not specialist in these kind of things, but speaking in an abstract way only about the shape of the note and what these notes make, growing up, going down, make a jump, make a repetition. We can make a lot of interesting things. I told you at the beginning that we are free. Yes, in effect we are free. For example, I can decide to play the first note of the first sentence staccato. It's wrong? No, it's not wrong. It's good? I don't know. I will not do this. But if it seems to you that it works and that it's explained and this make a sense, you can do it. I can, for example, make staccato the second note. What probably I cannot do is to make a lot of different interpretation in the repetition, in the similar place. For example, the first sentence I make the first note a staccato. In the second sentence there is the same of the first, I make the second note a staccato. In the third sentence that is very similar at the first, I make the third note a staccato. And let's make some confusion. All these is too much. Look the composition. There is a repetition. C, D, E, C, C, D, E, C. A repetition with similitude. E, F, G, and then repeat it. E, F, G, and then after other things that we will speak about. So the music is symmetric, need repetition, and also the interpretation need repetition. Of course, we can also decide that, for example, the second sentence is like an echo. So when I say Aldo, and the echo say Aldo, the echo in the mountain is different, is less sound, less voice, less strength. So I can play an idea. I don't agree with this idea because I think that this music is not built with something that could seem echo, but is legitimated. I can play the first sentence with pair. C with D, E with C. For example, tied note. I can play the first two notes staccato, or many notes staccato, only the first note of each bar long, entire. This interpretation is not bad. I will not do exactly the same, but it's not bad because this interpretation has a strong relationship with the bar line. We know that in a bar, the most important note, the note that does the stronger accent, is the first of each bar. For this reason, the piece starts with C, but probably the stronger note is not C, is E. Pam pam param, pam pam param. And this is interesting for what we have to do, speaking about the second Bruder Jakob, after the rest. This is Bruder Jakob, exactly the same, but written starting not on the third beat of one bar, but on the beat number 4. That implies, in this way of writing, that is incorrect, attention, that the most important note is not E, is D. So, the Bruder Jakob, if we want to make an interpretation of the Bruder Jakob written, it's just an example, not, but written in this wrong way, we have to create in the listener the correct impression, sensation, interpretation, so that is the first D is the important note of this bar, and in bar after the important is again D, and this bar after the not important is F. And what, sorry, this was the computer, and what can we do? C, D, C, C, D, C, E, F, G, E, F, G, G, A, G, F, E, C, G, A, G, F, C, G, A, G, F, E, C, D, G, C, D, G, C. This was just an example for explaining you that when we make an interpretation, we try to express and share the idea that we have of this music, but also that the idea that there are in the text. I'm not speaking of scene of interpretation. As you can see, this music is without scene of interpretation. And mostly of the music before Mozart, before Beethoven, is completely without scene of interpretation. And I like this because as interpreter, I am very free. For example, I can make for example, I can make together 3 notes. Or I can make tied D-E. D-E-C, I'm sorry, 3 notes. I will not make this interpretation, but it has a sense. The sense of interpretation is in the repetition, and the sense of the interpretation is like theater. You have to be convinced to say I love you or I hate you, and you have to convince the listener that you love and or you hate or you are angry or you fear something, so you have to know how metal to use, how in which way you can express express something, share something, and then you have to be convinced, and you can decide what you do. Of course, it's a good idea to follow the interpretation suggested by an editor. There is many editors that put lines, punct, forte, piano, or the interpretation suggested by a teacher. A teacher told you, oh, I think that you have to play, and so it's a good way for learning. But the most interesting, the most important probably things is to find his own interpretation and to try to share and to make this interpretation that the listener could recognize and understand. I hope it has been useful. There is a lot of things to do about interpretation, but this was just some of these things. Bye bye.